Hi, welcome to our webinar, No Such Thing as Social Media.
So to get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about Genoo and about myself. I'm the president and founder of Genoo and our professional services agency called ContentZAP. I was lucky enough and honored to be named one of the top 20 digital strategists in 2015 by the Online Marketing Institute. We work with businesses of all sizes to supercharge your online marketing, and particularly your content marketing strategies and implementations. And we also offer online marketing tools and marketing automation to small and mid-sized businesses. So today, one of the things that I'm really thrilled with is that we have a awesome guest, Nick Kellet, who is the co-founder of Listly, which is the largest list app on the web. And what's fun is to be able to bring people like Nick into a webinar for all of you so that you get these really fresh ideas about how to think about content, because we know that content marketing is the new game. So as you start to think about content marketing and what you need to do, people get overwhelmed with all the content you need to produce. So I think the idea is today that we're going to start, and of course this is a three-part series of webinars just for 30 minutes to give you some really good ways to think about your content strategy and things that you can do to be more relevant with your content. So without further ado, I am going to turn this over to Nick and let him take over.
All right. Good morning, everybody. So, yeah, today we're going to talk about social media and why it's actually two things and not one. And the reason I kind of came upon all of this analysis and thinking about social media, I discovered people weren't really mindful of what was actually happening on the internet and how things were actually working. And it's not surprising, really, because social networks arrived first, and then media platforms arrived second, and they were just bundled under this headline of social media. So people haven't really realized these two things are distinct. And really, I kind of describe social networks as 4 or 3.5, if you count Google Plus as a full player or not. And social networks really are where the people are at the center stage, and it makes it easier for people to manage and find and engage and connect with other people. And these different types of networks have different functions, but they're all people-centric. And conversely, in comparison to that, you've got media platforms, the likes of YouTube, SlideShare, Instagram, Listly, SoundCloud, and all these platforms basically let you manage media separately, but they're much more focused on everything there revolves around the content. It's less to do with the people, it's to do with the content. And so these platforms actually behave differently, and you should approach them differently. And I think the risk and the danger of bundling social media into one term is people fail to appreciate there are really two different beasts in play here. So, you know, first of all, social media is really a sort of people catalog, right? It's sort of a proxy for our identity. It's who we are. It's how we find out what other people are, right? So if you want to find out about my profile, you can go to my LinkedIn page, or you can look up me on Facebook, on Twitter. You know, there is an identity and existence out there for anybody that you want to look up at. You know, but there's a parallel for media platforms. Is there a content catalog? They're a proxy for knowledge, and these are places we go to find things. You know, if our TV's broken, we go to YouTube and find a video that's going to solve how to fix it. We don't tend to go to the company's website anymore, and we've moved into a self-service economy. And you know, maybe I often go to SlideShare to look for information, or I'll go to Listly. These places are all destination search sites. So I go to social networks to find people, and I go to content on media platforms to find content. And there's some great parallels, because the two systems are, you know, they're digital, they're online, they have lots of metrics. So in a content network, your metrics around views and shares and where the content's being viewed and who's engaging with it. On a social network, it's about how many connections you have and what likes you have and what's your influence across different networks. So at a social network level, you know, these are definitely destination sites. People go to Facebook daily to check out what's going on, to engage with their friends. You know, they go to LinkedIn to check out what's going on, to research people, etc. Right? So these are terms that have kind of slipped into our common day vocabulary is the social graph, coined by Mark Zuckerberg, and that's basically who knows who, right? What's our connections? There's 6 degrees of separation. Is how do we reach somebody? No one is more than six connections away from us, and that number is kind of falling over time. And our preference graph is the other part of the social network, is what we like, the things that we choose and express an interest in. And compare that to media platforms, and we have basically they're a destination site. People go to these sites to consume content. They are search sites too, right? This is one of the things most people miss about the value of media platforms. For example, YouTube is the #2 search engine on the planet, but it's actually a media platform. People go there to search for videos and look up and solve problems. They go there via Google and they find videos coming up, or people actually go directly to YouTube to search for content. So I've coined the term content graph. It's basically we go to what's there to know and what is the best practice. How do we solve problems? And that's one of the things you think about in your domain is if you're not putting out content that solves people's problems, you're not part of the content graph, and people are not going to discover you. Then there's the knowledge graph of who knows what, who are the people to go to for a particular set of knowledge. And again, if you're not creating content and contributing to the knowledge graph in your niche, then you're going to be missing out. So people hang out on media platforms to find content and find expertise, and that's the question here. Are you there? Are you involved in these platforms to be part of it? And these could be lists, slides, videos, podcasts. We all have to choose what media we want to make our own, where our expertise lies, where our preferences lie. You can jump between multiple platforms, but I kind of suggest you pick 1 or 2 to benchmark. Rather than trying to be a master of everything, but that depends on your team and your budget size. One thing that's really huge difference for me is that the lifetime value on a social network, from a content perspective, the content is so fleeting because the feed is algorithmic. It's also throttled, so I don't know if you're aware now, but basically Facebook has kind of shifted to a pay-to-play model, and so the feeds that people are seeing are definitely managed and throttled. So, and they also don't change. They change fast over time. So you can't go back to Facebook and find something very easily because your feed has changed. And you scroll back in time and it's somehow disappeared. Twitter's the same. They're constantly trying to curate that experience to keep more people on Twitter, more people on Facebook, and that has the impact that your content can get lost. You're not in control. Whereas on a media platform, your content persists. So if you drive people to consume content or to get your content to get consumed on these platforms, people can find you. And over time, you accrue social proof by the views, the embeds, the likes. You also accrue proof by creating a rich body of work. People say, oh, you didn't just make one slide deck or one list or you posted one photo on Instagram. You actually build a body of work. And one of the things I always find is some people say to me, oh, I knew Twitter wasn't going to work for me, or I knew, Instagram wasn't for me. And these things are pretty much self-fulfilling prophecies. If you don't think a media platform or a content network is going to work for you, you're absolutely going to prove that hypothesis to be true because you won't be committing to it. And I think the difference is, and the people you see that excel on any of these platforms or all of these platforms are people who commit, and they have to find mastery. They have to dig deep and try stuff, because not everything works. And I honestly know, I can tell you that I put out a lot of content, and I can't tell you which piece of content is going to work. I can have a good idea, I get better at it, but the best way to figure it out is to expose your content, and you learn by more exposure. The more risk you take, the more you put yourself out there, the more you'll discover what's right and what's wrong, and what works for your audience. So it's interesting to think about these two, but I think people on a social network, they think about something. When you put out a tweet, the half-life of a tweet is sort of measured in minutes, if not. It used to be hours, but it's going down all the time because our attention our attention span is very short, but also the content is churning. The content volumes are so fast. So for me, I certainly see more value. It's more easier to create an impact on on a media platform. And part of that possibly is because people are so focused on social, they haven't fully understood or exploited the value of a media platform at this point. So, I always think of the book by Keith Ferrazzi, Never Eat Alone, and he talks a lot about connecting ahead. And that's very much the case with a social network. You should reach out to people you want to meet and engage with ahead of time. But, with content, you're creating ahead. And you should, if you want people to find you, you have to create content that they're going to be looking for in the moment. People are, we don't want to learn anything complicated. We don't want anything more than we need to know. We want to solve our immediate problem. And if your content isn't there to answer that problem in the moment, it's somebody else's content. When someone jumps on Google and tries to solve something, or jumps to YouTube to find a video, if your content isn't there, that's when you're going to be missing out on. So, you need a strategy for both. You need to be social. You need to have a social strategy for the social networks, and you need to have a media strategy for the media platforms. And if you do that, and you're conscious of how you're investing and where you're investing and how you feel your time should be invested between the two, then you're going to be in a lot better shape than if you just kind of casually assume that social media is one big bucket and any or all effort is good, because I think there comes a point of limiting returns. You don't want to focus on too many things, but if you focus on just one, or you don't have a strategy, you will get slightly sideswiped and overwhelmed by the platforms. This is an interesting angle here that basically you can be two things: social centric, and I think most of us are, mainly because social networks came first, and because we don't necessarily understand the power of media. But we can also be media centric. And so what this means is, if you build a following on Twitter, on Facebook, on Google, on LinkedIn, that's the kind of size of your social centricity. But conversely, what's your following on SoundCloud, on Instagram, Flickr, Vine, Listly, SlideShare, whatever? If you have more followers on those platforms, you can be media centric, and there's a real competitive advantage to being media centric. And so just to analyze this, here's an example. I don't know if you've heard of Gary Vaynerchuk, but he's a very vocal guy. He runs a creative agency in New York now, but he was very famous for Wine Library TV. He's a very social guy, and he has 3.6 million followers the last time when I produced these numbers across 4 different networks. Conversely, his following on all of the content networks only amounts to 800. I say only, that's a pretty large following, but it's only 830,000 followers. And so he's socially centric. That's his bias. He's more about engaging in conversation, which totally fits with his persona. And if I compare that to somebody you've probably never heard of, a guy called Nash Grier. This guy is called the king of Vine. I don't know for how many of you use Vine. Probably very few. Maybe we're on the wrong demographic, but you and I maybe scratched our head when we saw Vine, and Nash Grier saw an opportunity, and he made these very specialist Vine videos that got him a massive following. And so he's, last time I checked, he was 9.5 million followers on Vine, and that's great. And what he managed to do then was he then created extra YouTube content specific to YouTube. He didn't just move the content from Vine. He created different content for YouTube, and the point and the value of that is each of these platforms has their own culture. So Twitter's very about short, Facebook's more about social exchange with friends, Vine is very, very short form videos, and he's kind of mastered that. But then he did a really awesome job of translating that into YouTube videos, and now his YouTube videos get millions of views, and he's monetized his YouTube channel, and he's fully sponsored because of that. And he's got a massive following on Instagram. So he's really playing the media game, and he is to me, is a bit of a shining star and a leading light in how to utilize media. And so yes, he still has a significant following on Twitter and Facebook, but he is content centric, and that's where his investment and his strategies lie. And it's obviously worked for him. He's doing very well. So I've talked a lot about social networks today and talked about media platforms, but really there's also blogging. And I think one of the things is these 3 things play very nicely together. So social network is where your people live. If you follow the advice that I'm taking, is media platforms is where you should build your content, and then you create blog posts reassembling that media. So you might put some slides from SlideShare. You might build a Listly list and embed that and create a listicle, top 10 ways tip inside a blog post. You might embed a video. You might embed some Instagrams. But your blog is about gathering your media and telling a story inside a blog post. Equally, your media can be shared inside a social network, right? So your slides, your videos, your lists can be shared inside a social network. But your media platform is your media is standing as its own asset, as its own searchable entity that people can find you, not just from your blog. And the danger is if you don't have a media-centric strategy, your blog is working alone, and you're not leveraging the power and traffic and the audience that are hitting all these different media platforms. So we're very focused on social networks because we've all heard of those and we've used those and we think that's social media, but there's really, as I was saying, there's really two parts to that. So, if you just create a blog and that's your media strategy, then you're earning what you're creating something called owned media, and you absolutely have to have owned media. I am a massive fan of having your own blog, but what I've learned to be more effective is to create your own blog and embed into that blog different media, so slides, videos, and lists, and then you get all these these 4 extra blocks of traffic and attention and traction, different ways that your content can get exposed. So media sharing, these media elements are much easier to share than a blog post, and they're actually more contextual. People are short, snappier. If you play to the short attention span, you actually deliver people a short snippet of content. They will consume it. It's more likely to share because it hit a particular point with that audience. So media is, because it's shorter and more precise and more contextual, it's easier to share and has a better impact. The other big thing is if you create great media, then it's embeddable. So that's people can embed your lists, your slides, your videos on their blog and talk about you, and that's what's called earned media. Earned media also gets you search traffic through earned media. People discover you by organic search to other people's blogs, so that's a big hit, because you want organic search on your blog, but if you get covered on someone's blog that's bigger than you, you're basically borrowing their audience, and so they're reading and discovering and consuming your content and becoming aware of you through a blog post, and maybe that was just search traffic. They weren't looking for you directly, but they found you in an article. And then media search. I mentioned that YouTube is the #2 search engine on the planet. So if your content isn't on these search engines, people are only going to find you by your blog and your blog's Google ranking, which is a challenge. Whereas people are always, Google will keep changing all their engines and algorithms, and so there's an element to saying if you spread your risk between investing in your own media, your blog, and investing in media, you're getting you're bypassing, you're insulating yourself some exposure to Google algorithms, and which is a very important part. So possibly something not everyone's realized is media platforms really began with Flickr in 2004, with YouTube followed on its heels pretty quickly, and you'll see then it progressed out slowly over time. And that's kind of why maybe some people haven't realized this, because it took 8 years or more for all these platforms to emerge, and they're still really emerging now. And so this is a solid trend, and this group of platforms really, they all behave in similar ways. They have different cultures, but if you embrace the concept of embeddability, it gives you, it explains to you in a way. Some of the things I'm trying to explain today is how the internet works and how the machine works, and that gives you a lot of value and a lot of power. So I've talked, liberally today about video, audio, slides, lists, graphics. These are all the types of media you can have in these different media platforms, and so you have to decide, what's our use case? What are we trying to solve? What's our own preference? Is our product, are our teams suited to video? Are we, do we enjoy audio? Can we create slides? Can we create lists, etc.? What's the media for us? And there's no right answer. It's totally personal to you. But just to close off here with a few examples, just to show you that. The point being is every one of these examples, don't get put off by the content or the volume. I'm looking at because I could find examples that are in your space with with appropriate numbers for you. But this is an example of a slide deck that I produced that got 16,000 views, and that's awesome. What if I'd not made a slide deck? I just made a blog post. Well, 34% of those views came from embedded media. A smaller percentage of that came from my own blog. But what's important is, 66% of those views came from a media platform, right? So I got exposure through SlideShare. I got exposure through these lists of blogs that were writing and talking about my content, and so therefore the brand exposure was being generated, and that's really a lot of the value. So you'll see here is an example with videos. Again, here's a video that I uploaded to YouTube. It's a clip out of Seinfeld about the origins of regifting, and this video got picked up and embedded and got 50,000 views, but 66% of these views were from embedding. So this reach works really well. Here's another example from Listly. So 50% of this list's 166,000 views came from embeds on multiple platforms. So you're combining both the platform, the views on the platform, the views from search, the views from earned media and embeddability. It's just you're basically removing friction. This is a fun example to close on. Is really here's an example of the White House using media. This photo got 2.4 million views on Flickr. You can embed this content. This is how you enable reach and traffic and traction. You don't need to think about 2.4 million views for your brand. I was blown away. I discovered I posted a photo and it went up to Flickr and it got 200 views about a webinar I was producing, and I was like, oh great. If I hadn't done that, if I hadn't used that platform, that's 200 people that wouldn't have seen my brand or my message. And just making people aware, because we need to always have these little drip feed messages into people's kind of psyche, because it takes 15 to 20 exposures to tip people onto your brand. So a few questions to end with. Maybe we can open up to some questions right now. But I think these are the questions I've been sort of tipping and asking throughout this webinar. So. I think really that's it for me. We can tie up with some questions.
Excellent. Well, Nick, thank you so much. I do have a couple of things that you said. One of the things that we talk about with our customers a lot is expanding your content footprint, and really focusing, because most of the people we work with, it's where can I put my energy to get the best return? Do you have recommendations for which are better for B2B as opposed to B2C businesses, so business to business businesses, and where they could focus for a starting place to really start to explore your ideas here?
I think it just depends on you, your brand, your team, your passions. Maybe you've got something of your age profile of your product and your audience. One of the things I try to do is I try to author once and then publish to multiple places, right? So if I've created content, I can output it to different platforms. So I tend to mix it up a little bit. Like if I've made a slide deck, I'll always share an image from that slide deck on Instagram, not the whole slide, just the headline page, and then I'll publish the same content as a list. So I'm getting, I've gone through the emotional heartache and the effort of creating content, which is the hard thing, and then using these platforms to put the content out there. You just never know when it's going to get found.
Right. Yeah, and I love that example from a reuse perspective, because if you're going to put all the energy into creating it in the first place, that's a really good thing to think about. Now, one
final point there as well is say avoid personal bias like the plague. We kind of tend to say stuff like, well, our audience doesn't watch video or something, right? Don't let your own personal bias speak to this. Just say, look, these things exist. Everyone consumes differently. Some people love to read, some people love to listen, some people love to watch. And if you turn off that whole audience by not providing that content, you're just cutting off your nose just by your face because of your own personal biases. So
right. Yeah, so what people could do to get started, just really quickly. For example, you're the founder of Listly. People love
Hmm.
lists. They could go out, create an account out at Listly. It's free to do. And you could start to create some lists and then embed those in your blog and start to see, not only expand and start to create some things out at Listly, but also have things to put on your blog and then just see how that goes. Would that be a good place for people to start?
Yeah, I would start by creating content, but the other thing that most people tend to do is they do one or the other. They spend more time promoting other people's content sometimes,
Hmm.
or they create their own content and don't promote it. So don't make content and then sit and watch and wait for it to be successful. Content gets to be successful because you work it and because you share it, because it's relevant, you're
Right.
adding value, you're not getting in the way. It's not all about you, right?
Right. Well, I want to end really quickly with let's just give a little sneak, a little preview, a little sentence about the next one we're doing, Turn Lurkers into Leads, which is coming up in a week or so. Just give me a little snippet on that one, little teaser.
So really, there's most people have not heard of something called the 1% rule, and the 1990 is the kind of magical number, and 1990 explains that 1% of people create in any community, 9% of people will contribute and add to the original content that the 1% have made, and 90% of people consume. And if you don't understand what that means, and you don't have a strategy to deal with the 90%, you're actually got a marketing strategy that's catering to the minority, not the majority, and that, in my mind, is a big mistake. So that's what we're going to talk about in that session: is why the 90% are the big opportunity
All
that
right.
we're all ignoring. Yeah.
All right, well, excellent. And there are some questions. We're going to go ahead and get them answered offline because we're at our stopping point at 10:30. So we're going to go ahead and get those questions answered offline. And I see a couple of questions there that we weren't able to get to. So thank you very much, Nick. We will see you on the next one. I look forward to it. If you haven't registered for it yet, I strongly suggest you go register for it, and we'll pick it up then.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.